And we are back with an all-new episode of the Keep It Obituaries. I'm Ira Madison III.
Hello, I'm Shelley Duvall. I mean, what else am I supposed to say? You got to begin with that. I'm Louis Vertel.
Hello.
Yeah, go ahead.
I love that. Hello, I'm Shelley Duvall.
Yeah, it's you have to get a little bit more sing-song. It's hello, I'm Shelley Duvall. Like there has to be a lilt to it.
Yeah. What is that from again?
Oh, she hosted Fairy Tale Theater in the 80s. She's the rare person who straddles the prestige 70s cinema and children's television. I really can't think of anybody else. Like Lawrence Fishburne is sort of does a little bit of both in terms of prestige, and he was obviously on Pee-wee's Playhouse, but it's very rare that we get people who do both.
Yeah, that clip obviously went around this week. I feel like it goes around every few months, but then it started going around after Shelley Duvall passed this week. It's just a clip of her introduction in each of those episodes, and it's just saying, "Hi, I'm Shelley Duvall."
And she's usually in a different
costumes.
Yes, different version of what I would call a demented Raggedy Ann getup. I mean, there's always a pigtail or an askew kind of aprony looking gown. Anyway, but
Eureka's Castle coded.
Yes. Oh, Eureka's Castle, one of those shows like Bear in the Big Blue House, where the guy in the costume is so frightening because his neck moves too much. That is, I can't stop thinking about the neck movements on those creatures.
Yeah, this is a sad week on Keep It. Usually we have someone dying who will take precedence in our topics for the week, but this week we have 3 people.
4.
4. Oh, yeah. We got Shannen Doherty, my girl.
Namely your girl. Like this is the kind of person where when they passed away, I thought, all right, Ira's in DEFCON 1 right now. I absolutely know he's getting out the clips from Melrose Place. Yeah.
It was such a weird moment, too, because I was at Good Room in Brooklyn seeing Carrie Nation play. And obviously they finish around like 5:30 a.m., 6. And I'm taking the train home and drinking water, climbing into bed. And literally the last thing I see before I'm about to fall asleep is Shannen Doherty has passed away. And do you think I went to fucking bed?
Absolutely no. No, a new day begins. Yes, correct.
Yeah.
And that was also, again, as you said, the 4th person to pass away in a very short sequence of time. We had Shelley Duvall, Richard Simmons, which watch me compose a poem live on the air about how much I fucking love Richard Simmons, how one of a kind he is, how essential he is. We'll talk about him today. Then, of course, we'll get a little bit into Dr. Ruth, too. Really, Dr. Ruth and Richard Simmons, 2 people that you expected to see about once a month on morning TV during a certain era of television. Like, you couldn't avoid them on the Regis and Kathy Lee circuit.
And even the kids circuit, I want to say. Dr. Ruth was obviously a person who was very important to adults, like she would be in on daytime talk shows, etc. But Dr. Ruth was also a person who would pop up on MTV shows.
Oh, yeah, because she had, kooky appeal. Like, let her meet the young people and stun them with her candor, sort of thing.
Particularly, was it like Loveline with Dr. Drew?
Right, and Dr. Adam Carolla. That's correct. Imagine Adam Carolla telling you. Imagine taking his advice for what to do while, I'm sorry, fucking? Excuse me? Not my
Honestly,
fucking.
Though, we should bring back those kind of shows, to be honest. I don't think there's enough shows with an expert and a random celebrity talking about your love life.
Well, also in general, I mean, aside from things like QVC and I guess Watch What Happens Live, more shows where people dial in because that energy is just unmistakable. Like the way Larry King would take a caller and I'm like, who the hell is this? Do they know anything about the news?
Should we take callers more often?
Oh my God, that'd be so much fun. We did that once upon a time. Real Frasier shit.
Yeah. It was fun. The pandemic, wild era for this show.
Yeah, right. Up was down. We just tried whatever.
So yeah, we have these 4 deaths that we're going to get into this week. That's why we don't have a guest this week because I feel like we just have a lot of ground to cover.
Right. I'm tapping my watch. Yes.
But let me tell you, I know who didn't die this week. Donald Trump.
Oh, I see. I thought this was actually leading into the Katy Perry topic, but yeah, Donald Trump does seem to be alive. Yes. Oh,
no, Katy died this week. Katy died many deaths this week. We will be talking about a woman's world, obviously. But, this isn't Pod Save America where you're going to get your hot takes on what this means for democracy. But, man, just hanging out at home, not paying attention to a Trump rally, because why would we ever? I feel like they're always happening.
Right. And there's also the most information-free zones on the planet. Like, you're not going to come away from it being like, oh, he really illuminated that complicated issue this time. No, he called somebody ugly, Yeah.
It's a traveling circus is what it is. It's a modern-day Barnum and Bailey. But he was shot at on Saturday. And that was another... The leading into learning about Shannen Doherty's death, early Sunday morning, late Saturday evening, the surrealness of the Trump assassination attempt happening in the middle of the day at his rally, and then sort of going about the rest of the night. And I don't know how it was for you in LA, but just talking with people, it was still like it didn't happen. It was a very weird thing to discuss having happened just a few hours earlier.
Also, I found out about it when I was in a crowded car with people on our way to a pool party. So everybody is just everybody has googly eyes like Stick Stickly, if you're familiar with Nickelodeon lore. And we get to the party, and then so I hear about it, and I finally watched the footage of it, and honestly, your instinct is to go to a place like Twitter, but I didn't even want to see the jokes. I didn't want to see the content, which I knew was going to be multiply and it'd be the same joke we saw again and again or whatever. I'm not saying I needed it to be a somber moment where I think about how important he is for society. That's not it at all either. It's more like my brain just went into force quit. It was just, well, that's it's unspeakably bizarre. We're living in the bizarre, and I need a moment just to zonk out and not think about this more. But then, of course, I thought about it more, and I realized who has encouraged more political violence than this person. So it feels like the fourth verse of Alanis is ironic. Not that we needed another verse in that perfect song.
That is the exact takeaway from this, by the way. Who has encouraged political violence more than Donald Trump and his party? Because, of course, what they love to do after something like this happens is find a way to blame Democrats.
Right.
And then, of course, what Democrats do after this is fall for the bait.
You're like, moment of silence, everybody. Let them harass us.
Everyone jumping to say, oh, we don't encourage political violence. We should never get to this point. It's like, are you stupid? You're like a mouse running for the cheese, the fake cheese, and getting snapped up by the trap. Every time this happens, do you think that they give a fuck anytime anything bad happens to us? I'm not saying you have to be going on, you don't have to call in to the hotline and cheer that he was shot, but also you can also just say nothing,
right.
Because
they're running game, and we're dressed as referees being like, that's bad and that's good. Meanwhile, they're running game.
They're Lucy with the football.
Yeah. Oh my God, my favorite.
And we're Charlie Brown.
What? Yeah. An asshole. Yeah.
But what an idiot. Kicking for it every time.
Yeah. He's like, this is my chance. After all, I am still a superstar athlete in my head. He was delusional. Charlie Brown is one of the most delusional people in the history of pop culture. Meanwhile, and Lucy is like a Republican. Meanwhile, she's like, I'm actually a psychiatrist. You should be coming to me for advice. I know things. And meanwhile, she's like total quack. Again, running game.
Yeah. Doling out her advice at her stand. Honestly, Peanuts is sort of probably apt for politics right now because Biden sounds like the teachers. It sounds like the adults talking in Peanuts at this point. He gets on the mic at anything and it's was that English?
Yeah, and Charlie Brown looks to the camera and he's like, yeah.
And not just falling for the bait in the sense of, the Democrats themselves, also people who are voting Democrats, because I'm sorry, I should be able to tweet something about how his answers in a Lester Holt interview where Lester asks him about this fucking propagating political violence thing, like an idiot, the worst journalism you've ever seen. And then Biden actually responding in earnest instead of being like, girl, what you talking about?
Right. He did sort of set Lester Holter straight by the end of the interview, being like, why don't you ask me about the 28 lies he told or something like that. But yes, you're right.
You do that, and then you mention that, and then you have people in your mentions being like, well, I don't think that this is helpful. I'm like, my tweets are not deciding democracy at this point, okay? I mean, what are we doing here?
I still am looking for people to identify a reason more than cringe why they're so obsessed with getting rid of Biden at this particular moment. I don't really get it. It feels like petulant teenage response to the fact that he's getting words mixed up. I don't think he's, going to fall asleep on a lever and accidentally, nuke the Eastern Seaboard. Like, I don't know what you think is going to happen with Biden, but anyway.
That's fair. I do think we still have another debate left. I think that we have just several months going on before we get to the election, and I think my concerns and other people's are that he might get worse, and if things get supremely worse right before the election, then what are we going to do?
My answer to that would be vote for the administration that he represents and not just him. But anyway.
That's fair.
Anyway, the only debate I'm interested in having right now, Shelley Duvall's best work. Let's get into it.
Okay, we will be right back with more Keep It.
This past week, it seemed like every day we were getting news of a celebrity's death, from Shelley Duvall to Richard Simmons to Shannen Doherty to Dr. Ruth. Even the tippity-tip of Donald Trump's ear has fallen. How Holyfield. We could dedicate this whole segment to just one of their legacies, but we're going to cover as much ground as we can about their careers and what we'll miss most about them. I guess we'll start with Shelley Duvall, since she died what seems now like years ago based on the week we've had. But my immediate thought when she passed away, and if you're not familiar with Shelley Duvall, she's the star of The Shining most famously, but she was in a number of Robert Altman movies in the 70s. She makes an appearance in Annie Hall. She was in Fairy Tale Theater in the 80s. There are not many actors where the minute they are on screen, they are commanding. There is something about this woman and just her look, which is she's got these round eyes, much like actual olive oil. She was in the movie version of Popeye 2, directed by Stanley Kubrick, one of the weirdest movies you will ever experience.
I love it.
Yeah, okay.
Of course
interesting.
I do.
It's the most dank-colored movie for being a Popeye adaptation. Anyway, it's so strange. But Shelley Duvall has such a tenderness when she's on screen. There's a quality where you're looking into her eyes, trying to interpret what is going on in this person's head, because something about her is so obviously unusual. I'm going to make the Louis Virtel comparison right now. You would say Sandy Dennis comes to mind. They both have this like strange kind of insect-like vibe when they come on screen, but at the same time, there's a thoughtfulness about them too. And Robert Altman was obsessed with the both of them, cast them in multiple films. He was like, come here, ladies. Come here and chatter on screen with me. Come here and tremble, which is what these women did really well.
You know what? I just really love, obviously, The Shining is where most people would remember her from. But it is just this sort of commanding thing about her that almost like takes the film away from Jack Nicholson.
Yes, right. She's a completely different universe mentally, not just because he's a crazy person in the movie, but because who is this woman? Yeah.
And there's really nothing like just watching her sort of unspool in that movie. The obvious scene is the one where, he's chopping down the bathroom door, trying to get in there, and there's the "here's Johnny" scene. But seeing her react to the acts like chopping up that bathroom door is truly one of the maybe top 10 scenes in cinema for me.
Oh, yeah. I mean, also when she's running through that hedge maze and the running itself, the movements she's doing as she's trying to get away from Jack Torrance, I guess I would call it galumphing. Just the kind of animal, like a limp animal, like the shoulders are moving, like the elbows are moving, and like barely her knees are getting off the ground. The trudging is so painful to watch. It's so well realized. And of course, that is one of the most famously tumultuous movie shoots of all time. Jack Nicholson in one interview said that Stanley Kubrick became a completely different director to Shelley Duvall, who took 99 takes to finish the bathroom scene that you were talking about. Some people would say that what happened to her on set of that movie is like a little bit overblown and maybe underestimates her abilities as an actor. But at the same time, it sounds like hell to me. I would not want to be on that set. So the fact that we got an iconic performance out of it, and by the way, it took a few years, I think, for people to accept that performance as iconic because it was a Razzie-winning performance once upon a time. And in fact, it's the only Razzie Award-winning performance where they eventually rescinded it based on what she went through on the set of that movie. Not that the Razzies have any stature whatsoever, and we should be talking about them as if they mean anything. In fact, I think on this show before, we've talked about how actors win Razzies, and it's always like we're just ribbing them a little bit. You know, like, oh, Sylvester Stallone, you were in another bad movie. Whereas the women who won Razzies, namely for Best Actress, it was always like, you're a pretty woman who wants to be taken seriously, and we're making fun of you for it. It was always people like Madonna or Melanie Griffith or Demi Moore or Sharon Stone, people like that, where people couldn't handle that they were commanding respect in any way. So they wanted to take them down a notch.
And I would say that the women, by the way, are the only cool thing about the Razzies, because the only time you ever hear about the Razzies in a fun and interesting way is when one of them shows up to collect their award.
Right. No, the Halle Berry, the Sandra Bullock, etc.
Speaking of just even that shoot for The Shining, was that and Popeye both came out in the same year? So
yes, correct.
Which one was shot first?
I would assume The Shining, since it took forever.
Yeah. But I'm just thinking about Kubrick and his, fucking shoots and how fucking long they are. I mean, Nicole Kidman has talked about how she went to shoot Eyes Wide Shut with Tom, and they thought it was going to be, just like a short film shoot, and then it ended up being, I think it's in the Guinness World Records of being the longest constant movie shoot that ran over 15 months, including a period of an unbroken shoot of like 46 fucking weeks.
Jesus Christ. And at that point, Nicole's like, get these thetans off of me. I'm getting the fuck away from Scientology.
What would you say are some of Shelley's sort of underrated performances or things that people should check out? I'm sort of partial to, she doesn't have a big part in it, but I'm sort of partial to Roxanne.
Yes. No, a movie that never comes up in the context of Shelley Duvall. She is really good in that. We talked about this movie before when Sissy Spacek was here, but Three Women from the 70s is this bewitching film. I actually don't want to give anything away about it other than they both give definitive performances and you want to see them together. From the minute that movie starts, you're in an atmosphere that feels initially uncomfortable, but you really warm into that movie. It's fabulous. She's in McCabe and Mrs. Miller at the beginning of the decade. It's a Robert Altman movie that's a sort of revisionist Western with Warren Beatty. I would recommend that too. But also, look her up on Fairy Tale Theater. I think she had a lot of joy in her as a performer, and you get that in these introductions to these, strange vignette-y things. A couple years ago, Seth Abramovich wrote a profile on how Shelley Duvall was living now, and that's a really refreshing read and not exploitative the way her appearance on Dr. Phil was a couple years ago, where he basically treated her like a dying dog, a pathetic creature. And in case you needed any further validation that Dr. Phil is maybe less than a good doctor.
Really?
I know.
I have an appointment. I have an appointment with him tomorrow.
Kathy Griffin used to always make jokes about him. Like, I think he's like a botanist or something. It was always...
Honestly, I always forget that Dr. Phil was one of the main producers on So Help Me Todd, the CBS show that I worked on. We had a whole meeting with him at the beginning of it just so he could meet everybody.
Oh my God. Well, he's one of those Judge Judy like people who's worth like $750 million for some reason.
Yeah. Also, side note, since you brought up Warren Beatty, have you ever seen The Roman Spring of Mrs. Stone? With
Vivian Leigh. And Lottie Lenya. Yes.
Yeah.
It's a crazy movie.
It is crazy. It is. A friend recommended it to me, and I rented it on Amazon and watched it. I'm fascinated by it. It's based on the only novel that Tennessee Williams ever wrote.
Correct. And obviously, Vivian Leigh in a Tennessee Williams place. I always support that. But the takeaway from that movie is Warren at his youngest is just you can't believe somebody is that attractive. Well,
he's so
this
hot.
will come up again later this episode when we get to my Keep It and the new Faye Dunaway documentary. But stay tuned. Woof.
The last thing I want to say about Shelley Duvall too is there's this Twitter account like Shelley Duvall updates, and the person who sort of ran it had a relationship with Shelley too, and that's just very sweet to see. You know, her later in life, like this person would visit Shelley often, have conversations with her. It's just nice that she had this sort of connection to the outside world in her last days. And very funny thing is that one of the last tweet, the day or so before Shelley died, the person who runs the account tweeted that she played Sabrina Carpenter's Espresso for Shelley as she liked it.
What a way to go. If I died tomorrow and that was the last single I heard, I'd be like, humanity, you're okay with me.
All right, let's roll into Richard Simmons.
Guys, this is devastating. Okay, I don't know if you remember early in the pandemic on Keep It, but while I was working out at home, which, by the way, I can't believe people work out at home and sweat inside the houses they live. I think that's so
Some
shocking.
people still do,
I think it's very
I
weird.
have a friend who does home workouts, doesn't go to a gym anymore, and it is disgusting, not just being that sweaty in your own home, but your workout clothes, your weights here, like in your living space where you live. Like even people with their fucking Peloton bikes, I don't want that shit in the presence of my home.
No, in fact, during the pandemic, I bought a treadmill and it was being delivered to my place, and I don't know, it fell off the truck or something. I'm picturing some sort of Marx Brothers like mistake. It never got to my house, and I'm so glad. I mean, like I like a treadmill, etc. But yeah, not next to like my DVD collection. Come on, let's have some dignity.
What kind of "What's Up, Doc" scene is this where your treadmill is falling off of a truck?
The truck crashes into two people holding a giant pane of glass. Yeah, right. Richard Simmons. Okay, I mean, first of all, it must be said, at a certain time in history, in the 90s, really, but even before that, when like Sweatin' to the Oldies came out in the 80s, this is somebody who was not just famous. He was, I think, one of the most famous people. Like he is in this space of like Vanna White or Dr. Joyce Brothers, or Dr. Ruth, really, where they appeared so often and in spaces in television where everybody saw them, that I think it's fair to say they were as famous as like Michael Jackson and Madonna. It would be so weird if you didn't know who Richard Simmons was once upon a time, and he was the face of fitness. You know, a couple years after Jane Fonda dropped out of the fitness industry, Richard Simmons really kind of took over. And for me, I think the amazing thing about Richard Simmons, and of course he was never quote unquote out in his lifetime, but he really represented in his physicality, what he wore, how he looked, how he sounded, basically everything a man is not supposed to be. I mean, he was extremely loud. When he was excited, he was a screaming queen. There's no other way to put it. Screaming queen behavior is what he represented. The way he loved old music, like Sweatin' to the Oldies got me into music. It's like, oh, what are the Supremes? What are Martha and the Vandellas or Jerry Lee Lewis? It's like, it's sort of foundational when you're just acquainting yourself with the essential music of American culture in the 50s and 60s, really. But also, there was a lack of self-consciousness about just exhibiting queeniness. I say I feel sorry for gay kids who did not grow up with Richard Simmons, because you knew that somewhere in the world, someone was just beaming with exuberance, everything inside them, whether or not it was entirely masculine or entirely considered conventional behavior. I mean, he really made a kid feel like you could be a kid as loud as you could be, and love being alive. Really, there was a joie de vivre about everything he did, and the joie de vivre was more important to him than, for instance, representing fitness just in a muscle-centric way, the way the rest of the world did. And I don't know that we have many people who have done that since.
I mean, you can definitely tell kids who were raised by seeing Richard Simmons on TV and kids who were raised by Kurt Hummel and the New Directions.
Yeah.
different kind of
We're
cleaning
at
out.
war, by the way. We're at war. Yeah.
I think that's also a really interesting point that you just brought up about the not just caring about the muscle, like sort of like the image of what a person who works out all the time. You know, you wouldn't expect to see Richard Simmons on the cover of Men's Health currently, the way that you see people now within the fitness industry, the way that you see people on Instagram, etc. Sort of within this world. There was just always this idea that working out was fun,
right?
And that everyone should do it.
And it was for everybody. That was, I think, also a big part of the triumph of Sweatin' to the Oldies which was his first videotape in 1987. It takes all kinds. There are people there who look like they belong on a Men's Health cover. Then there are, I'll say like older mom figures or something. And then there's even older people or even younger people. He really was, it was an energy forward situation. Everybody can feel really, effervescent as they dance to this music, as opposed to just, and of course this is the 80s where things like steroids are becoming really popular, I'll just say, for example, that Sylvester Stallone looks a lot different than he does in the original Rocky by the time you get to Rocky 3,
Arnold Schwarzenegger,
Yeah.
And I think that the one thing about TikTok, I would say, at least in terms of I'm always watching dancing videos, right? I think that we've kind of gotten back to this point where when you watch people doing a TikTok dance move, it can just sort of be like anybody. It can be like mom and dad's doing them. It could be someone who like doesn't look like they'd be a backup dancer for a pop star. And you just love that they're dancing and hitting the moves, and it's fun to watch. I think that there was just a period where fitness culture became so dominant, especially through social media, and it just became so image heavy that the idea of these old workout videos, infomercials that we grew up on, where you would see the people working out behind like a Richard Simmons or Billy Blanks or whoever looking like regular people, we got away from that completely. I think it's still so foreign to some people to the idea that regular people take sort of a workout class, and I feel like now it's probably intimidating for people to sign up for an Orange Theory or class at Equinox or something, because you don't really have that image in culture anymore of working out is fun and for everybody.
Right. Well, also in general, I think on social media, how often are we actually exhibiting in an authentic way joy? I mean, it's just like, it really is all about looking like an attractive postage stamp, as opposed to being like, my spirit is being rejuvenated and fed right now. I also want to say about Richard Simmons, you would probably know him from cameos on talk show appearances, throughout the decade, namely on David Letterman's show. Now, I grew up on David Letterman. That droll bastardliness appeals to me. It is very funny. I think David Letterman should apologize to Richard Simmons. The point of Richard Simmons being on that show was that he was a joke. And it's like, it was an easy pot shot to take. I'm not saying hitting a skittering man in little shorts with a fire extinguisher doesn't have comic value. It probably does. But it was mean. I mean, it's just, I think this is somebody who could expect to walk through life encountering meanness, which is interesting because he was so empathetic, often to his own detriment. This is somebody who would meet people at workout classes, forge lifelong friendships with them, call them when they were having problems, and get into real, like, deep friendships with almost everybody he met, to the point where it makes sense that he became a hermit, because he just couldn't handle how emotional a person he was, how empathetic a person he was, how demanding those relationships could be. He was posting on Twitter very recently before his death. I think his death is a big shock to his family ultimately, but he's just somebody who, even if people like you and I appreciated his like queeniness, I don't think that was utterly appreciated the world over. I think the whole point, I think a lot of people just treated him as a joke that we all were in on, and it was gross. There was a gross quality to how we accepted him.
Yeah, and I would say that I like the moments where he's able to reclaim that and sort of be a part of the joke. I think that this clip that was going around recently of his appearance on Whose Line Is It Anyway?
Oh, yes,
and I thought
yes, very fun.
That one was funny, Yeah. That one was making fun of, his queeniness, like doing sort of like this gay sort of bit. but it was improv and it was on his terms and it was funny and he wasn't the butt of the joke. He was in on the joke.
Right. I do think, and I was worried when I started watching that clip because when he walks onto the stage, like, even if they're joking, like Ryan Stiles is kind of wincing at him. So you didn't know how much he was going to actually get to be a funny part of the bit. But no, it's a very classic appearance. He also was on the Rosie O'Donnell show a number of times. And there's one clip where he runs in and excuse me, picks up Celine Dion. Imagine. It's like running around with like the Statue of Liberty in your hands. It makes no sense. It's very crazy.
Yeah, that we've talked about that before the show. That is honestly a classic clip that needs to be found. We need the entire Rosie O'Donnell show streaming, by the way.
No, talk about a show that needs to be revisited in podcast form. And by the way, Rosie is still like a great broadcaster. Whenever she comments on stuff, she's got like the sound bites down to the word. I would love to hear that.
We're due for a Rosie Sans, and we're going to get it when And Just Like That season 3 drops.
Oof. I am overwhelmed already. I am overwhelmed already. Miranda and Rosie.
Lewis is grabbing the table, everybody. That's when you know that the news is intense. Speaking of you grabbing the table and bracing yourself for something, you did that last week when I told you about Halle Berry and Glenn Close joining Ryan Murphy's legal drama starring Kim Kardashian. And would you believe it? Halle Berry dropped out of that so quickly.
I believe we
Yesterday,
helped.
she dropped out of it. Glenn, you're next.
Right. And by the way, I saw Glenn in the trailer for that new Lee Daniels movie, and something might be going on there. It looks going on there. We saw the photos of her looking, very like she was living at Marjorie Taylor Greene's trailer park. Okay? Yeah, right.
Like it was giving that. The hair, the cigarette smoking, and I know it's a menthol.
Yeah, right.
And the trailer though, I really wasn't expecting it to be a black sort of exorcist.
Yeah.
And the cast of it, I mean, I was just hooked by the trailer in general, but at the end of every sort of trailer where it lists actors' names and it always says like Academy Award nominee and then Academy Award winner, when it was just like Academy Award nominee Glenn Close, Academy Award nominee Andra Day, Academy Award nominee Anjanae Ellis, and Academy Award winner Monique. I was like, bitch, I'm in. This is giving Paperboy Part 2.
Yes.
Okay.
Also, excuse me, like Monique acting again? Okay, yes. I mean, like, there's nobody who thinks that Oscar win is undeserved. She motored through that year. We talked about that with Anna Kendrick, who was nominated against her. She was like, I got out of the way. Yes, I am very upset. And also, Anjanae Ellis is one of our best actors. I'm still not over what she did in Origin. That was a fabulous performance. Anyway, we have a couple other deaths to get to. Let's get to Shannen Doherty. Okay, my in with Shannen Doherty, of course, is the movie Heathers, where the wardrobe is pristine. Heather Duke looking absolutely phenomenal. But she is more important, I think, in the primetime soap universe. And I believe, Ira, I assume you've conducted a song or a dance for us to commemorate all this.
I will sing the Smiths song that was the Charmed theme song. No, I'm kidding.
Oh, yeah, of course. Charmed, too. Yes, right.
Yeah, Charmed is where a lot of younger people remember her from, which, by the way, I started watching Charmed again on Peacock. They do not have the rights to that Smith song. So there is some shitty like royalty-free music playing.
When you watch an old show again and they don't have the music, I have to shut it off. It's all wrong. I need to get the actual music that set the tone for what's happening on the screen. For a while, like you couldn't watch The Wonder Years without the original music. And it's like, I'm sorry, if I'm watching the Wonder Years, I do not want to listen to a Muzak version of Joe Cocker or whatever you play over the opening credits. Absolutely not.
I mean, and the same sort of problem happened with Beverly Hills 90210, where, of course, Shannen Doherty really came to prominence, where she played Brenda Walsh on the show. The show was about her and her brother, Brandon, moving from the Midwest to Beverly Hills and the culture shock that happened. That was the initial conceit of the show, obviously. And then it just became a crazy teen soap opera. Mm-hmm. But one problem with that show, too, is Aaron Spelling's shows, he was the producer of the show, and Aaron Spelling, of course, has produced Melrose Place, Dynasty, all of these,
Hotel,
big, major,
Charlie's
these
Angels,
big, major shows. But his soap operas always had a point where around season 2 or 3, produced Charmed as well. Around season 2 or 3, a character opens up a club where all the people start mingling.
Duh. Let's get them all on one set. Let's get them all on one set. Yeah.
They had the Peach Pit on Beverly Hills 90210 that became the Peach Pit After Dark, a club. And that was one of those shows where, because it was Fox and because it was the 90s, there'd be people like Christina Aguilera appears in an episode, or like Boyz II Men performing at this club. And then if you don't get the rights to that fucking music, that episode's just missing from streaming, But getting back to Shannen, she is such an interesting case of a celebrity, because if you know anything about Shannen Doherty's sort of issues on set, there was always, she's fighting with somebody on set. And, someone was always saying she's a bitch. There were always stories about conflict with her on set. And I really think that she was more of a misunderstood sort of person. And she had her podcast recently where she was really sort of diving into a lot of her past conflicts. And she was really sort of apologetic about sort of the way that she was as a teenager. I think like the fame going to her head immediately from Beverly Hills 90210. And then, of course, we know about the conflicts that she had on Charmed. But I will say, the fact that Holly Marie Combs and Rose McGowan love Shannen Doherty down and do not fuck with Alyssa Milano tells me that Shannen was not the problem on that show.
Which is interesting, because I think the prevailing memory of that show is that there was a Ding Dong the Witch is Dead party when she left the show. And the assumption there is she was entirely the problem.
Yeah, and then I feel like time always tells the truth. Once the election rolled around and Alyssa Milano became Alyssa Milano, we were like, oh, that's what Shannen was dealing with on set.
Mm-hmm. Also, I was acquainted with the fact that a huge part of maybe why her cancer diagnosis got worse is her health insurance lapsed around 2014, and by that time, like, the cancer got so much worse. What a completely depressing thing to learn.
Yeah, that fucking sucks. And like by a year passed, and when she went in to finally get checked up again, the cancer had grown to a point where, if it had been caught a year earlier, she'd be perfectly fine.
Right. It's unbelievable. Unbelievable.
Yeah. But getting to her, just sort of like the way that she would sort of reflect on who she used to be, on like the relationships that she had. I thought there was a really interesting post from Lisa Ann Falk, who played Heather McNamara. And she's, of course, the last surviving Heather from the movie Heathers. And she had an interesting post, which was one that I really appreciated, because I think that when people die, there's this immediate sense to glorify them and just go into this whole like, we were best friends, or like, I love this person, like I'm going to remember everything positive about them. And Lisa had a lovely post where she wrote, I felt quite conflicted about whether I should post anything. To be honest, Shannen and I weren't friends. I hadn't seen or spoken to her since the cast and crew screening of Heathers, the movie that defined us both in a public fashion. But by chance, I had recently listened to her podcast and was genuinely moved by her desire to, quote unquote, set the record straight, as she owned up to some of the uncomfortable hunks of truth in her past. We've all got them. Yet Shannen's courage in addressing them publicly as her health deteriorated, there's only one response: how very. And I think that is sort of a defining sort of thing for Shannen. I think that it's very rare that a celebrity, or even people in general, get to reflect on who they used to be. And then the journey that they've taken in life to become a different person. And it's sad that cancer and her life deteriorating was a part of it. But I think Shannen sort of went out, like a rock star.
Do you have a favorite Shannen moment on Beverly Hills 90210?
I mean, so she was always involved in the love triangle with Luke Perry, And you know, he was dating Kelly at one point, and then he was dating Brenda. So their fights were always fun, but I don't know, I just really enjoyed the moments where she and Luke Perry were laughing with each other and having fun. I love that relationship on the show, and they feel like teenagers. The fights that they have are very like heated and intense and romantic, but yeah, they're just really sweet moments, you know? And I think that if you jump into Charmed too, I tweeted this, but like she sort of had this like this inscrutability about her when she was on Charmed. Like she was much older, you know, sort of like she could deliver a line with the cock of her head and just like sort of a look. Like she was very much sort of just like that bitch on that show. And I don't know, just watching her every week, it was just like she was cool. And I think to people in the 90s watching her on Beverly Hills, she was also cool. She was just a celebrity who epitomized cool. And there were a lot of people from that era who sort of represented that sort of cool factor. I think that was sort of the big height of right after the Brat Pack and stuff, right? You know, so it's like teens
yeah, they took off where the Brat Pack left off. Yeah, totally. Yeah, absolutely.
You're cool. You liked how they dressed. You liked watching like who they dated, etc. And she grew up into just like a cool adult too. So I don't know. I really loved Shannen Doherty, and it's so crazy to me that she sort of is placed in pop culture in such an interesting way, where it's if you're thinking about what pop culture means in general and the most important parts of pop culture and sort of where we are now, Heathers and Beverly Hills 90210 are like pillars.
Totally. Absolutely. Now, speaking of cool adults, we'll tie this up quickly. Dr. Ruth. I mean, I think one of the rare people who is probably quotable every time she speaks. Like you could write it down and it's probably helpful. Honestly, as far as you need to go, our friend Ryan White directed a documentary on Dr. Ruth a couple years ago. That is so good. Tells you everything you need to know.
It's
and
really
also,
good. She
became one of these people known for being spry and truth-telling even into her 90s. So, also, by the way, there's another documentary about Sister Helen Prejean coming out called Rebel Nun. That looks really good. Sort of the same thing. It's like, wow, this person is still crusading. This person is still living, dead man walking, you know? So watch that documentary. Really enjoyed it. Unmistakable personality.
I still remember Sister Helen Prejean tweeting at me. I wish I remembered the tweet. But it was something obviously goofy about the movie Dead Man Walking. And she responded, and I was like, this woman is alive?
Yeah, she's around. Absolutely.
Yeah. I was absolutely shocked. What I loved too about Dr. Ruth was just sort of her appearance on other TV shows too. Like she'd pop up in sitcoms and stuff too. Like that. She was just fun to watch. So.
And also, we keep having
look
sex,
up one of her sex
so
books.
she's right.
Yeah. Should look up one of her sex books or talks and be like, is this still valid now?
Probably.
Yeah. Well, that was actually that was not as dour as I thought it would be. You know,
no. Well, we
nice
we like these people. Yeah, it was, and also I think there are people who are perceived in different ways, positively and negatively, and some of that was earned and some of that was bullshit. So I was happy to unpack that.
Yeah. Another person received positively and negatively. We're going to get into when we return. We're going to talk about Katy Perry's A Woman's World.
The satirist of our times.
We already knew Katy Perry's comeback was in trouble when we heard that snippet last month, but now that the song is out, baby, she pulled that out the litter box. The only ones lucky enough to be living in that woman's world are the people who haven't seen the video yet. Because the song, I will say, C-.
I feel the same way. It's not a complete failure. It's just neither here nor there. It's okay.
Yeah.
It's like if this were the 8th single off a really popular album, I'd be like, all right, we're like getting down to not much material at all, but you got to put out something. As a lead single, it makes very little sense.
Yeah. But the video is truly horrendous. And we talked about this when we talked about Katy Perry's Vegas show, about whether or not, like camp works for her, whether or not she's funny. And she was funny at one point, but she really has devolved to this point where a wacky smile is what makes the video for her. It's just like her putting on lipstick and having it like not be on her lips while in the car with Trisha Paytas is not funny to me. It hasn't been funny since the Joker did it in Batman 32.
Right. I will say when the anvil hits her, okay, I laughed. Okay, I can get a little wily humor in there. All right, but you're right. Otherwise, it's just, I think, one of her worst videos. You brought up the Vegas show. I laughed routinely during that show. Now, can I be held accountable for my laughter based on, the press pill that may have gotten into the drinks that week? Who's to say? I don't know. But watching this, it did not feel super joyful for me, and it doesn't make the song sound any better. I will say another problem with the song is it's missing ingredients. Where's like the bridge? Where's the pre-chorus? Why is the chorus only the one line repeated twice? It's like they gave up on the song while writing it. And of course she's reteaming with Dr. Luke here. And look, if you're gonna make a Rumpelstiltskin-like deal to get him on the mic, at least get one of the bangers. Jesus Christ, why is this what we got?
She went to see the doctor, but she's paying out of pocket, okay? She does not have insurance.
Oh, God. We're all the copay. Yeah.
The main problem with her going to work for Dr. Luke, too, is the fact that the song does not hit. The gays are ready to pounce.
Yes.
Obviously, whenever there's even a whiff of Dr. Luke's name being mentioned, right? But Kim Petras, even though she's attacked from time to time, has largely avoided this. Doja Cat largely avoided this. Other people like Nicki and have released songs, and people still listen to old Dr. Luke songs. If this was a banger, it might have quieted the murmurs a bit, but girl, it's bad.
Yeah.
It's bad.
Also, I do have to say, though, I feel like people went overboard in criticizing the quote-unquote message of the song. Like people being like, oh, it's so cringe, like the woman's world sentiment or whatever. Girl, do you think like Umbrella has a powerful sentiment? Like it has nothing to do with how much we like a pop song. I'm not saying like the lyrics couldn't have been improved, but you could probably improve the lyrics to most songs. If you read the lyrics to Call Me Maybe, you'd be like, well, why can't we incorporate something, involving the hardships of reality? I don't know. And the reason is you don't have to. It's a pop song. It's mostly just, a piece of candy you pop in your mouth. I felt like people were doing the most to add heft to disliking the song, and they wanted to turn it into like a treatise on why Katy Perry can never work or doesn't work or is completely oblivious to what people want. And it's just an okay song that's a flop a little bit. That's it.
Okay. I mean, the preeminent women's power anthem is Spice Up Your Life, I would say. And that's got Yellow Man and Timbuktu thrown in there.
That's right.
What are we really talking about in that rap breakdown?
That really is an overwhelming lyric. What are you supposed to do? Timbuktu. The country is Mali, where Timbuktu is, by the way.
The other thing about Katy is that she just sort of makes herself a target so easily, and I don't really get why. I mean, someone was wondering, like, why are people so mean to Katy Perry? And people really do get mean with Katy Perry. Like, they get nasty.
Certainly. No, that's what I mean. Like, it's like you couldn't just say the song isn't as good as it should be based on her, amazing track record of number one hits. And other songs that remain underrated. We were just talking about Bon Appetit is an amazing song. When that song comes on, I'm like cross-eyed and turned out. I'm ready to party. Or that song that
She gave me all that I want,
talk.
boy.
Yes, right. And right. And that's a song again about being eaten. Like it's not deep and it doesn't have to be.
Do you think Armie Hammer loves that song?
Do you know that he's back? Excuse me, he is on Bill Maher's show. Where else the fuck would he be? I'm sorry. I mean, well, as you guessed, that's where he is. I am curious to hear, though. Because I also feel like, I'm not saying, I think there's some legit abuse in the Armie Hammer situation or whatever, but I also feel like we turned those texts into one story that it wasn't. I don't know. I'm interested to hear what he has to say. I'm interested.
So he's a cannibal. All right. I mean, I'm sure he's on the dark web right now looking for the remnants of Trump's ear.
Sure. Right. Ear, send to me. He types.
Yeah. Honestly, he probably has Van Gogh's ear, too, just like on display.
Oh, you think he like collects celebrity ears?
Yeah, like a fine bottle of wine, that you're gonna crack open at one point. I think Van Gogh's ear is somewhere safe in Armie's home, and he's just waiting for the moment to, fricassee that bitch.
I picture the ear like levitating in a sort of a liquid display, sort of like Zordon on Power Rangers. That's how I picture it looking like. A little lava lampy. Yeah.
Yeah. Alpha 5, very Richard Simmons coded.
Quite. Oh, yeah. I was looking up interviews. Yeah. Stop me if I brought this up before. With Trini, the late Tui Trang of Power Rangers, recently. Gorgeous girl, beautiful speaking voice. May she rest.
No, he's probably got that ear. He's probably got Evander Holyfield's ear.
Yeah, what other...
I'm just now imagining a whole ear collection.
Yeah.
What other celebrities have lost ears?
I don't think many. I think you may have covered the whole gamut. I don't think there's a whole, 5-question Jeopardy category there.
But no, this whole thing about Katy is just very easy to attack her. And I will say, she does open herself up for it, because I don't know if you saw the video where she explains that the Woman's World video is satire. And I'm like, girl, if you got to explain the joke, what are we doing here?
I recently have been kind of acquainted with a number of people, I will not mention names, who, for whatever reason, when I go out and they're in my orbit, they have to explain to me that they're really funny. Like, they bring that up, and then they're like, oh my God, you don't understand, I'm really funny. Did you know that you can just be funny? You don't have to actually have a preamble. You can go right into it. We're all waiting.
Most people who are funny are described by their friends and actually random people they've met as funny.
Yes.
I mean,
it's like being a good singer. Yeah, it's like, oh my God, have you heard this person sing? Because people like it. You know what I mean? It's not something you have to sell like those shillers in the Say 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 video with Michael Jackson.
It's the number one thing that people sort of look for when they're dating and looking for a partner, and it's also the number one trait in sort of awful people that makes you sort of not hate them as much, because what do we always say about Donald Trump? He's honestly one of the funniest people alive.
Right. Which is, I think, the thing ultimately people like the most about him. There's like that makes him sort of impervious to a certain kind of criticism when you can respond with laughing at other people because of him.
Right. I mean, by the way, getting back into that whole don't make fun of like the shooting thing, his comments about Nancy Pelosi's husband almost being attacked, where he was like, working on security there. Guess that didn't work out so well. That's funny. I'm sorry. And if he's making that joke, then you make a joke about him being shot. If Biden went up to the next debate, I would be fully on board with him staying the nominee. If he went up and did sort of like gun fingers at him. Almost gotcha.
It's so easy. Yeah. Also, Grandpa Joe is a fan of the finger guns, right? That's sort of his brand of humor. He's been around the block. He does a little rootin' tootin' finger gun action because he was also at the gunfight of the OK Corral, so he remembers.
I was gonna say he was one of the original cast members of Gunsmoke.
Yes. Miss Kitty was his first wife. Yeah.
I don't know. I'm hoping that the rest of the album is good. She has played snippets in an interview with Zane Lowe, and there have been other snippets that she did on Instagram Live, and they're giving sort of a few of them are giving Molly music. Like they are giving the beats
not
dropping
Timbuktu
in the club.
Molly. This Molly, correct. Yeah. Go ahead. Yeah.
The beat is dropping in the club, you're turning up. Like that is what we want from Katy. And what's so interesting is that song she did with Alessio, When I'm Gone, and then 365 with Zed. Those were such interesting spaces for her to move into, very Ava Max-y vibes, you know? And I feel like Ava Max came up and stole her food, you know?
Yeah.
But Katy should have gone in that route. But for some reason, she still thinks that she can reclaim that teenage dream pop era. And we've moved on from that. Just give us some shit for the club. And you can get some number ones. BB Rexa and Rita Ora have them, okay? So I know you can get it back.
Also, Diamonds and Dance Floors by Ava Max. I'm telling you, one of the best albums of the past 3 years. It comes on, and I'm running a Barry's class right in the car. Doing flip-flops from the front seat to the back while I'm at a red light.
Right, but because it's Ava, people don't really know it outside of gays, you know?
Right.
And imagine if
really
Katy Perry
a lot of
sang that.
respect yet. Yeah, right. Totally.
Yeah. Imagine if Katy Perry had released Diamonds and Dance Floors.
No,
it would have worked out in her favor.
Totally. Absolutely.
I mean, I'm sure she thinks about that because Woman's World was originally a Ava Max song that she took and then had cleaned up.
Right. Yeah. Did she just drop it? Like she just recorded it and didn't want to do it?
Yeah, I think she recorded it, didn't want to do it, and then I think the doctor was brought in to Frankenstein a new chorus or whatever.
Oh, I see. Yeah. Anyway, remains a C-.
Yeah. So it's not even the doctor's full work, to be honest.
That's true.
Yeah. It's he just did some cosmetic surgery on the song and left us with what we have. So
hopefully the rest of the album is better, but I am optimistic it will be.
Yeah, I mean, even at her worst, you know, like she gives you some bangers on the album. Witness started out with a whole messy fucking rollout. That's when I wrote that Vulture article. What is Katy Perry doing? And then, lo and behold, there's bangers on the album.
Right. Wait, the first single on that album is "Chained to the Rhythm," right?
Yeah.
What a weirdo first choice for a single. I'm not saying that song doesn't kind of grow on you after a time, but you would be crazy to put that in your 10 favorite Katy Perry songs.
I think also the Marley feature on it is so weird too because she kept talking about purposeful pop and then you hear this song and it sounds almost reggae tinged and it was like, well, if she was going to release her version of Rocksteady, maybe I would have gotten it. But nothing on the album sounds like Chained to the Rhythm. And then she releases Bon Appetit and Swish Swish and it's okay, well, the purposeful pop went out the window, bitch.
Yeah, tell me about the purpose of Swish Swish. With that Space Jam ass video.
That is also, by the way, her brand of comedy is just cameos from random celebrities. Like that's fun to her.
Oh my God! Remember when Taylor Swift would just hit us with cameos in every venue of her life again and again and again? Sorry, let's bring this back to somebody I feel very comfortable slamming, Taylor Swift.
You know what? Did she even release a new thing this week? Does she even have to bother competing with Katy?
Right. If you're not familiar, now people are on to Taylor Swift, who, when like another female artist comes out with some banger thing, like Charlie XCX, Brat, etc., she then reissues Tortured Poets Department in some new form, where it has one track that was previously only available in like the Philippines, but people are on to her now, so maybe she'll slow down.
Yeah, I mean, she did release the acoustic version of Fortnite, which I will say, I kind of love.
Oh, man.
Kind of hits. But
I don't want to be on my own team right now. Go ahead.
But side note into that Taylor thing, it reminds me of a very funny ad I saw. I have not seen Long Legs yet, but Neon released an ad, a poster for Long Legs, and it says, the #1 movie in America. And then with an asterisk underneath it, it says, after Despicable Me 4. and then a Charlie XCX fan made a Brat one with the #1 album in the UK, and then with an asterisk after Tortured Poets Department.
Oh, that's very funny.
Yeah.
We probably won't have time to talk about this. Director of Long Legs is Osgood Perkins, the son of Anthony Perkins, and he's been a little bit.
I did not know
Yeah.
I did not know this, by the way. That
Osgood Perkins is in like Legally Blonde and 6 Degrees of Separation. But he made some comment where he's like, I don't watch modern horror, and then he said, I haven't seen Maxine and I haven't seen X, and he just brings up the movies of Ty West, and clearly there's some issue there with Ty West, because then he goes, horror is such an important genre though, so he loves horror but just doesn't keep up with those movies. Anyway, I don't know what's going on there. I haven't seen Longlegs yet. I'm doing it this week.
I'm seeing Longlegs and Maxine this week. I'm gonna have my whole horror moment at the cinema. But I was one of the internet people, by the way, who was, I obviously love Anthony Perkins. I'm not a Anthony Perkins aficionado the way that you are,
Some
apparently,
of us are, yes,
because I did not know about his mother dying
his
in 9/11.
wife. His wife died in 9/11.
Yeah, well, his wife and Osgood Perkins.
Oh, yes. Mother, yes.
His mother
Barry
died.
Berenson, correct, yes.
Yeah.
Sister
so
of Marissa Berenson, who you probably know from Cabaret, yes.
Yeah, I went down a whole Barry Berenson rabbit hole, so
Lots to learn.
and her Barry Berenson's mother, Elsa Schiaparelli.
Crazy, yes. The woman, the fashion designer known for shocking pink, yes.
Like, this whole web of where he is descended from is like that's beyond Nepo, baby. That's like iconic lineage. So
Yes, and his own father was a celebrated stage actor in the 30s. He died when Anthony Perkins was really young. But yeah, it's a crazy family with tentacles of prestige, all separate directions.
yeah. So next week we'll get into Longlegs versus Maxine. So can't
Look
wait.
forward. We'll be right back
All right.
with our favorite section of the episode. It's Keep It.
We are back with our favorite segment of the episode. It's Keep It. Lewis,
Yes.
what are you angry about today?
What am I pissed about? My favorite 90s word, pissed. I was also just talking about, do you know what I think is the definitive 90s mood word? Moron. Calling somebody a moron. You remember that? That's how I got through middle school.
Wait, speaking of pissed, also the way that it means something different in like UK slang, like you're getting pissed, like getting drunk.
Ooh,
I was with a
right.
friend recently, and I was singing along to, for some reason, Chumbawamba.
Okay. A vodka drink or whatever. Yes. Uh-huh.
They discovered for the first time that the lyric was pissing the night away.
Right. There's a lot going on in that song, of course.
Yeah.
Go ahead and do a deep dive on that with the dramaturg, because you're going to learn a lot. Anyway, my Keep It this week is to a movie that I didn't entirely hate. I think, in fact, everybody should watch it. It's the new Faye Dunaway documentary that came out on HBO that I was so excited to see. It has interviews with Faye Dunaway, which is rare enough. It also has interviews with her son, which is actually an interesting component of the movie. He's been like a champion of his mother and somebody who I think has helped her through a lot of mental health issues, which are enumerated in the movie. The movie talks about how she is bipolar, which had never been disclosed before. And you also get a good but kind of cursory look at all the amazing movies she's been a part of over the years, from Bonnie and Clyde to Chinatown to Network, and then an interesting discussion of Mommy Dearest. But I do ultimately have to say keep it to this movie because they use the word difficult to describe Faye Dunaway a lot, and that word does a lot of heavy lifting, like to cover a multitude of sins. And the fact is, she wasn't just difficult. Faye Dunaway was the worst person to work with in entertainment history. There is no doubt about it. Anybody who has ever worked with her has multiple stories of just crazy, demanding, impossible to placate situations where they were at her mercy. And she would also show up a million hours late and stuff. And none of that is addressed in the movie. Other than she does say, like, oh, because of, being bipolar, these mood swings take hold from time to time. And that is one explanation. But the amount of cruelty to random people, I don't think is described well. And I do wish also that we had better insight into her as an actor, because she's such an interesting actor. When you watch her in Network, you're like, wow, this person was ready to play a psycho. The choices she makes are so eye-popping and so ghoulish, but also engrossing. You know, she has this kind of ferocious, sort of like jaguar-like appearance as an actress too, that you're hit with a number of sensations when you watch Faye Dunaway, and that's why she's irreplaceable on screen too. I do think the movie, one thing it does is highlight the movie Barfly from the 80s with Mickey Rourke, where they play alcoholics, and that is just a dense movie with fabulous acting in it. And Mickey Rourke has remained friends with Faye Dunaway ever since. But I do think we needed to get more insight into what she was as a force on these movie sets over the years.
Mm-hmm. Barfly. I have not seen that. I should watch it.
You have got to see that movie. Yes.
Okay. It's sounding like a John Patrick Shanley play from the 80s. But I'm seeing it was written by Charles Bukowski.
Yes. Right. Yes. So, I mean, that's what you're getting. That kind of woof.
Yeah, all right.
Kind of thing. Yeah.
Wow. I can't wait. I will say that movies like documentaries like this could always sort of benefit from at least one producer or someone asking questions of this person about their acting process. Because when you sort of get into the stories of like the salacious things or whatever, it's like that's sort of what you want. Like my favorite thing about the music documentaries, you know, it's sort of like when you hear something about how like Whitney and Clive were working together, or when you talk like David Foster, I always go back to how fucking phenomenal I think that documentary is, you know, because you're just hearing how much of an asshole he was. Everyone who's working with him is like, he's an asshole, but he's also a genius. And they talk about how he would create songs with them. And I think that's sort of what you needed from a Faye Dunaway documentary.
Yes, definitely. I was amused by the fact that apparently Jack Nicholson, at the time they were filming Chinatown, and thereafter to this day, still calls her Dread, because people would dread working with her on set. Ira, what is your keep it this week?
My keep it this week goes to some tweet I saw, probably from a minor.
Right. That's always the first question. Are they 11?
But people were agreeing with it within the responses and the quote tweets. And the tweet was something along the lines of, don't pretend like you knew who JJ Abrams was before you heard of Gracie Abrams. And I want to say, what the fuck?
Excuse me. To say my soul has left my body is such an I'm going to get closer to the mic. To say my soul has left my body after you said that is an understatement. What do you mean you haven't heard of JJ Abrams? I want to be clear that Google is available. Go ahead and put the words into it. You'll see that this person has been around and has been utterly unavoidable in pop culture in the past 25 years.
Yeah, it's not like he's a random director too, or sort of an auteur director that only like film nerds would discuss. Like it's JJ fucking Abrams. Okay, so we know who he is. We know what he looks like. We know his shtick. We know JJ Abrams is always going to have somebody opening a box that leads to another box, that leads to another box, that leads to another box. Lost, Alias. By the way, Lost is now streaming on Netflix, and if I have another keep it is there's a lot going on in the show Lost, but I'm tired of everybody just talking about the finale. Talk about anything else. There's so much else going on in that show. And fuck Vulture for releasing an article that was sort of like, here are the episodes of Lost that you can skip. The whole point of binging a show that you haven't seen before is, and especially Netflix, you just go episode to episode. Like, why are you even getting into the whole process of, I'm going to skip this episode or whatever? Like, you just let it play.
Yeah, right. Also, I mean, like, ultimately you can't recreate the feeling of watching that show during the time, which was, I mean, that took people on a roller coaster. They were enthralled. They became hyper fans. Like people, like it's one of those shows where there's no parallel. Like if you want to watch a show like that, you have to watch that show. So I think the hills and valleys made you more obsessed with it. Like the boring episodes or unnecessary episodes, I think, add to the addiction in a good way.
One of the insane finales, I'm trying to remember which one, but it's Lock in the Casket, aired the same night that Sex and the City 2 premiered in college, sort of like the midnight screening of it. So we did a double feature of the Lost finale and Sex and the City 2, which probably broke my brain. That is why I'm the person I am now.
To handle that and then Lawrence of My Labia. Yeah, I don't think that's for... Human beings shouldn't have to deal with that. You made a mistake.
By the way, Lost and Alias, and then you can even throw in Fringe. It's an amazing show, which I love, and I love that pilot. It's almost right at that caliber, but Alias and Lost, two of the most perfect television pilots I've ever seen.
Oh, yeah. No, I mean, Alias is why Jennifer Garner has some unimpeachability. I mean, it all goes back to Alias for her. Yeah.
It's not butter?
Or telling Love Simon, go ahead and breathe, bitch, or whatever she said to him.
Part of it also is 13 going on 30. We can't forget that.
I am not a huge fan of 13 going on 30. I'm surprised people stand that movie. Yeah. My joy-free life. You get it.
Is it a teen movie from the 2000s or 2010s that people love? Lewis hates it.
No, don't even start with me on Easy A. Don't even start.
I know. That is what I was referencing. You loathe that movie.
No, absolutely. I've had it. Yes.
Anyway, JJ Abrams
exists.
I love him. Yeah, he exists.
Seems like I enjoy him also. I told you I interviewed him once really quickly at an event, and I asked him about his favorite film moment of all time, and he picked something from Rear Window, and then I mentioned, I was like, oh, well, anything with Edith Head costumes in it, and he talked about how as a teenager he wrote a play about Edith Head because she was the only people who could make fat people look cool on screen, and he was like a fat teenager. It was like a very interesting insight into him. Yeah.
Can we see that from him?
Would love, please. Yes.
He is a celebrity who I love, a director who I like. I really enjoy him. Like, he has a lot of goodwill built up for me from the shit he's done that I love. But I would love for him to start making more interesting choices again, you know?
Yeah, please. Yeah, do the small prestige-y things. Yeah.
Yeah, and Gracie Abrams, I guess we're stuck with her now.
Apparently she's good. I don't know. Not really my thing.
Yeah. The album's okay. You know? So the funniest thing you've ever seen is the song with Taylor Swift called Us, is a video that they released of them coming up with the song. It's just like them singing at each other like lyrics. It's like a scene from a movie where people are creating a song like fucking music and lyrics with Hugh Grant and Drew Barrymore or something. And it's like, this was not when you made this song, but congrats.
Yeah. By the way, nothing wrong with the movie music and lyrics with Hugh Grant and Drew Barrymore. I love that pairing.
Absolutely not.
There is something wrong with Taylor Swift and Gracie Abrams doing that, though. I don't want to see that.
Yeah. All right. That's our show this week.
We'll be back next week, and I guess we're talking about long legs. I have to get to the theater.
Yeah. Use that AMC A-list.
Oh, you think I'm not on it? Please. If there were a physical card, I would be carrying it and flashing it.
Love getting in that yellow line and then them calling up A-list people and the other people in the regular line sort of looking at you like, what the fuck do they think they're doing?
And the answer is getting an icy faster than you.